My name is Jeremy Walton, and this is the Cinematography of Napoleon. Let's go! I've been waiting a while for this film to come out. I even went to Paris this year and tried to surround myself in its history. There was a lot to see, and I really enjoyed it all. I'd definitely go back. The film we're talking about is the 2023 film Napoleon, directed by Ridley Scott and cinematography by Dariusz Wolski. I'm going to quickly cover the camera and lenses since they really didn't mention it. I found that a bit odd, but they have been using the same combination for a while, so maybe they didn't have anything to add. Over on IMDb and under details, we can see the Alexa Mini LF with the Panavision Vintage 65s were used and a few other lenses to round everything off. There have been discussions about other cameras being used, but for now, this is all I got. I do want to show you his last film, House of Gucci. Under technical details, we see the same setup with the Mini LF and lenses. And just to give you one more example, his film The Last Duel, yep, the same setup. So like I mentioned, maybe there wasn't anything new to say about the equipment they love to use. Here's the Panavision lenses, and most are AT 1.4, which Wolski has mentioned he likes the speed, and below is a wide range of focal lengths they offer. Not a bad choice. Moving on. Because we're talking about Ridley Scott, I want to mention his storyboards. For a while, he did work with an artist, but that eventually ended. Frankly, I spent so much time explaining what I wanted, and they wouldn't do it quite right. So about 10 years ago, I decided to board things myself. In a funny kind of way, I'm writing. It's the visual narrative of what I'm going to have to do. The storyboards aren't stick figures. These are used to share with his department heads, and Scott refers to them as a super comic, which he did for each shot of Napoleon. We also need to cover lighting, but that starts with paintings. Let me explain. Two painters they mentioned were Jacques-Louis David and Eugène Delacroix. They were geniuses at observing light. One painting in particular is the Coronation of Napoleon, painted by Jacques-Louis David. And from watching the trailer, I knew this was going to be in the film. It was a little exciting because on my trip to Paris, I did get to see this painting not only at the Louvre, but I went to the Palace of Versailles and got to see it again. Taking a photo or video doesn't compare to seeing it in person, something I'll never forget. I bring this up because my first video on YouTube was about what filmmakers should be doing. That was to go to museums or art shows because a lot of well-known filmmakers do talk about taking inspiration from paintings, and this was definitely the case for Napoleon. With a period piece, you want to go as naturalistic as possible, so you basically play everything with windows and firelight. That's how people saw the world at the time. It does make sense taking this approach. They didn't have electricity, so light would have to come from a window or from a candle. This can be seen countless times in the movie, and it works. There was never a time something felt odd or out of place with the lighting. Ridley Scott puts it bluntly when he says, "There's a key light. I don't care where the cameras are. There's a key light that should never change position. Some people will be front lit, some will be backlit, some will be side lit. It ain't that complicated." Color wasn't talked about as much, but is a dominant feature. You have warm tones in scenes and literal fires to keep the warm look, to cool tones of battles that take place in the snow and over a frozen lake. It's a great contrast, and the desaturation of color at times I thought was fitting when thousands of people were shoulder to shoulder trying to kill one another. That felt a little too real. To film all of this only took 62 days, which seems short, but still had a budget of $200 million. Normally a film of this scale would take 100 days. We did it in 62, but we're not showing off. It just gets boring to go on for 100 days. 62 days is a fantastic toboggan ride. To do this, they employed 8 to 10 cameras. The director and cinematographer have worked together long enough to have an efficient system to coordinate the unplanned moments. Actors love it because they don't have to wait half a day for the close-up. Dariusz Wolski talks about Ridley Scott editing on the fly, so he knows what he wants and doesn't waste time filming multiple takes. Gladiator 2 was also talked about. I'm doing Gladiator 2 now in 54 days because I'm not doing 50 takes with one camera on one shot and then turning around. This normal fight scene could take anything up to a month. I'll take 6 days. I know when you saw the trailer you were thinking Gladiator, with Scott and Phoenix back together, but this film is a bit different. I'll get to that, so stick around. I think the battle scenes stole the show. There were these overhead shots I couldn't get enough of. Now CGI was used, but they were trying to shoot everything practically and on location, then manipulate the image to fit their needs. This involved using around 500 extras doing the real work of a battle, but using effects to magnify the scale, sometimes up to 40,000 soldiers, and I couldn't tell the difference. What surprised me was the ice scenes with the horses. Mechanical horses were being used as they crashed through the ice. It was very well done and took place in a tank. The soldiers fell through as well through a trapdoor contraption. Visually, it was a horrifying scene, but the ice, the cannonball fire really sold it with the sound design. It felt like you were there, and you'll get what I'm talking about once you see the film. There's a reason why this scene comes up in discussions. The cannonball fire is always worth mentioning. There was a lot of it, and again, the sound design really sold it. This was an air compression system that created a big puff of white smoke using talcum powder. This was much safer around cast and crew, although they did get reference shots of real cannon fire, so when they added the flames in post, it was accurate. If you couldn't tell, then they did their job. Looked real to me. You're basically creating a huge event. You have army personnel, you have extras trained to behave like soldiers from the 19th century, you have horse people, then you have armor, you have professional effects people, explosions, then you have main characters. You basically design the whole battle. Even the square formations the British used to scare off the Frenchmen's horses was complicated, as Ridley Scott was insistent on uniformity. The Waterloo battle was shot in only 5 days. I had some sleepless nights because I wanted to make sure that those guys did this square perfectly. They pulled it off brilliantly. I could hear Ridley on the radio, "Buy those boys a pint." I know I don't get into actually reviewing the films I cover, but this had to do with cinematography, so I want to talk about it. There was a shot in the trailer, this one right here, that I just loved. Joaquin has some great mannerisms that he has displayed over multiple films, but the way he walks up the stairs and how it's shot just screams, stuff is about to go down. It was an epic shot for me, but if you watch the film and the scene that happens before this shot, it's a different story. Not going to spoil anything, but there has been talk about the trailer versus the actual movie. The start of the movie really showed a terrified Napoleon heading into battle. So I thought, okay, this will be the start of the character arc based on the trailer. It was a bit different. I wanted to point out a shot in a trailer with music can totally have a different meaning than the same shot without music in a sequence of shots making up a scene. There were multiple shots I could talk about, but if this interests you, watch the trailer right before you see the film and make a mental note. There was also some controversy about this film and the depiction of Napoleon. I'll let you look that up for yourself. Ridley Scott had a simple response to all the critics about some of the inaccuracies. Get a life. I think that sums up his thoughts on the matter. Working with Ridley Scott can also be summed up with a quote from his longtime production designer. He shoots 12 hours a day. He then goes out to dinner with the actors. Then he works on editing what he shot that day. After that, he reads your pages, and the next day you get the email from Europe, and he storyboarded them. That would kill 90% of the directors in Hollywood. A lot goes into a $200 million film about Napoleon. I also suggest looking up the past history of the film being made by Stanley Kubrick. There's a documentary in the works about it. Very interesting stuff. I love going to the movies, and there's always something new to learn or absorb. That's what filmmakers do, and taking the time to see how directors like Ridley Scott tackle a production is worth the time. It looks like there will also be a 4-hour director's cut coming to Apple TV+, so you can always wait for that. I'll definitely have a second go around with this film. Well, there you have it, the cinematography of Napoleon. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button because there's definitely more on the way. Subscribe so you don't miss out. Leave a comment if you have questions. Until next time, it's a wrap.